The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davison, Lynette's is open for takeaway, noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit, and it is time for another episode of the week that was for June 25th already of 2021. Time is indeed flying, but I'll tell you what, it is not a great day outside. It's raining. It's pouring here where I am, and it looks like it's going to do that pretty much for the entire weekend. So you might as well strap yourselves in and give us a listen today, because there's a lot of really dumb stuff to talk about this week. Once again, I mentioned last week that the stupid meter was stuck at 11. Turned up to 11. We have not dialed it down yet. We need to get to it. There's a lot of things to talk to. Infrastructure comes to mind that we have to talk to. Critical race theory, we're going to spend a little time talking about, and the complete and total misunderstanding of that we are witnessing right now. Just put this in your brains, everybody. Fox News has mentioned that term over 2,000 times this year. 2,000 times already this year. I just read that this morning. That should give you something. So we're going to get into all that, plus a whole lot more. I have a great panel with me as usual. I have Nancy Derringer of Deadline Detroit with me. Thank you, Nancy.
Hey, thanks.
Allan Lengel is here with us once again from Deadline Detroit.
Hello.
Also, my longtime friend, Greg Bowens, who is the former spokesman for Mayor Dennis Archer, but also, of course, is a civil rights advocate and does great PR work and is now getting involved in this proposal P stuff, which I'm going to be talking about on Monday or Tuesday. I think Greg will work that out to get both sides of that really important issue out in front of voters here in the city of Detroit. But anyway, thanks for being here, Greg. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And Steve Fishman, of course, noted lawyer, will be joining us a little bit later. He is in court this morning. I mean, those pesky jobs get in the way of doing, your volunteer work for my show. So we'll forgive him this time. But there is a lot to talk.
We're not getting paid?
Yeah, that's right. That's what happens when you work for a guy who spent his career in public radio. I didn't get paid either. Yeah, it's true. All right, so let's start with Washington. Infrastructure. This may be a sort of kind of crafty and wily victory for Joe Biden if he plays his cards right on this one. He gets a bunch of Republican senators to get on board with a bipartisan deal, and then comes back and says, oh yeah, then we're going to use reconciliation to get all the social stuff through that I want to get. These guys are getting their bipartisan bills, so they get their bridges, they get their roads, they get all that kind of stuff. But now I'm going to go ahead and do this without the Republicans with my 51 votes. And it sounds like he's got Manchin and Sinema on board for this. This could be a pretty big victory for not just Joe Biden, but for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. It looks like
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, go ahead, Greg. Well, let's see. Because Biden says he's not going to sign either if he doesn't get the reconciliation bill through as well, which is that big one, the trillions and trillions one.
Right. No. Yeah. And I think that President Biden is doing a great job with trying to get it done. And I was watching his press conference, and he was talking about my colleagues, and I have more experience than all of you, most of you in the media covering this when it comes to the Senate and how to get bills done. He didn't say that in a boisterous kind of way. He just said it as a matter of fact. I mean, he spent a lifetime in the Senate, and the issue for Democrats, for many progressive Democrats, is his willingness to actually extend that hand, and not just extend the hand, but walk across the line. Now, that line may have moved a little further left from the centrist line of the Bill Clinton and even the Obama years, I would say. But still, that's the worry. That's the fear. And so you can get some of the stuff done in when they both come together and talk. But I'm not sure that a lot of the stuff that progressives love is going to make it through.
We shall see. I mean, I'm going to be interested to see, where this comes down, because, given how many teeth had to be pulled just to get people to come to the table to talk about this, despite the fact that clearly events in the last 48 hours in this country have shown that our infrastructure and our needs are incredibly important and they need to be maintained. I mean, I don't want to be remiss and I don't want to be flippant about this. What's happening down in Miami Beach right now with that apartment building collapse is just absolutely horrible. And that's privately owned, obviously. But there was a pedestrian bridge collapse in Washington, D.C. that killed a couple of people just a couple of days ago. We've had bridge collapses. We have been woefully underfunding this for a long time. And had they blocked it, I think they would have been in real trouble given the stuff that's going on.
Yeah. And these are, I mean, what we used to call pork barrel projects. Dollars
in your district.
Exactly. I mean, that's a politer way to put it. Dollars in your district. I don't understand why anyone would object to this. It's, as you pointed out, and this is about the most obvious thing you can point out, we've been deferring this investment for decades now, generations. I mean, a lot of this stuff was built kind of in the post-war prosperity boom. And we've forgotten the message that infrastructure investment always carries with it, which is it's not only a job for the people who build the stuff, it's rocket fuel for the economy because it enables people to do more things. You know, there's a very good case to be made against, say, urban sprawl for the sake of urban sprawl. But, you know, when you put together, somebody just sent me a text saying, "You look nice."
Well, there you go. That's the most important thing.
Oh, the Derringer fan base.
I don't know what you're saying, Nancy, but you look fabulous.
No. I put on red lipstick today because I'm still like in love with not wearing a mask. Anyway, when you build highways, bridges, parks, etc., you enable businesses to locate out there, and you just enable so many other downstream investments that it helps everybody. So, it's not just about getting rid of potholes.
Well, I think, I mean, infrastructure is always one of the things that you keep putting off and off. It's like when you're younger and you don't have any money and you're driving a car and there's something in the steering wheel doesn't turn quite right, but they tell you can still drive it. Eventually it's going to get worse and worse. And eventually you're going to, break down on the highway. And there's a point where we're breaking down on the highway and we need to address infrastructure. I mean,
and I mean, it's really hard to vote against this because, like I said, even if the people voted against it, they're still going to go back to their district and see, look at the cash I brought back here. Right. Look at the jobs that we brought back. We've seen that time and time again. And I think if you're Biden, you don't care about that. Go ahead. Go. Right. You know what? You did the right thing on this vote. You voted for it. Go ahead and brag to your constituents if you want to. I don't care. I think that's fine. They're going to have something else to answer for, though, on the voting rights stuff. Which we will get to as well, because I think that there's a lot to talk about. But so hold on, go ahead.
President Biden also said something I found pretty interesting when he was asked about, well, what if people try and fold on you? What are you going to do? And he said, well, we're going to go to their constituents and talk to them and say what you just said. Why would you oppose this opportunity to create jobs in this area? And so, maybe. I mean, that's. I can't think of a president who has said that before. I mean, Trump,
Well, Trump said a lot of things this week that we're going to talk about too, as well. But, all right. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens with this, whether they actually get the 60 votes they need on the one part, especially since the other part is dangling over their heads. Go ahead, Nancy.
I just want to make one other point about the auto industry. I mean, we're supposedly trembling on the brink of, greener cars and, technology that can radically cut emissions. But those are going to need its own infrastructure. It's going to need like fast charging stations, sensors on the highway to enable, better, I hate to use the term self-driving, but, driver assistance technology, shall we say.
Sure.
And all these things that are good for the auto industry, which is by definition good for Michigan. So this is something that every Republican in, the House and the Senate needs to be backing.
All right. I definitely wanted to get into that because I thought this was a pretty significant moment. We haven't seen this level of cooperation in quite a while in Washington. I mean, look, the debt ceiling debate's coming up pretty soon, and that's going to be just as stupid as it's ever been. Like the least important thing in the world gets the most traction because you use the word debt and people freak out. So it's
IQ points just fall out my ears when we talk
absolutely.
About yeah.
Let's go back to elections for just a little bit, because a big story this week in our state is that the Republican-led Senate did an investigation. Republican lawmakers took part in this investigation to find out whether or not there was any fraud in the Michigan election. They released a report the other day that basically just said, nope, there is no evidence of widespread or systemic fraud in Michigan's prosecution of the 2020 election. Citizens should be confident the results represent the true results of the ballots cast by the people of the state. They also went on to say that the people that are grifting off of this thing and making money should likely face some sort of punishment as a result of this, and saying that Dana Nessel should prosecute the people who are still trying to make money off of this, which is great. At the same time,
not prosecute.
At the same time, though, they still found a way to weasel this in there. They're still saying, well, we should still, try to make sure that our elections are secure as possible. So this is basically what they're saying is, yes, we agree this was all a big lie, but we're still going to push through the bills anyway in Lansing.
I'm with Trump. This is a cover-up.
Let's see if we can't get Steve Fishman in here at some point pretty soon. We'll see if we can get his camera working here in just a second. But, okay, here's the deal. If there was no fraud and that people should be confident that our election was carried out properly, why are they going forward with the bills?
Because they can. And because they want to. And, I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised that this, extremely conservative committee run by the extremely conservative Ed McBroom of the extremely conservative Upper Peninsula was able to come out with such a strongly worded report saying essentially what you just said. There was no fraud. There were glitches here and there, things that we can correct. Can we do better? Yes, we can. And that's why they're going to push these, or that's their stated argument for pushing these unnecessary reforms. I mean, to me, it all goes back to 2018 and Proposal 3. It's like people voted, 2/3 of Michigan voters wanted this. They want things to be easier. They want no reason absentee and all this other stuff. And it it infuriates me that they want to roll that back because, why. I mean, we could just go on about this forever.
I think it's also the way that they did the report and then they put it out like that. I think it's also, excuse me, indicative of how they see the power of the crazies in the Republican Party. I mean, there must be some level of fear that has dissipated as a result to give them the courage to say the truth. You know what I mean?
Well, I think probably the saner members of the party have been saying this. I mean, the rhinos have been saying this from the beginning. This election we lost the election fair and square. And I think, if this does something to just kind of push some people who are maybe too cowardly to say that stuff before, give some justification to say it out loud and not fear, being lynched or something. I think that's probably I guess it's a good thing. But they're, like Craig said, they're using this as cover to push their unnecessary reforms. And I just, I hate to see that happen. But Whitmer can veto it.
So this is something that I can't watch because we're on live right now, but Merrick Garland apparently is speaking right now. The Department of Justice is getting set to sue the state of Georgia over their new voting laws. And we don't know exactly what they're suing them over. But they're basically suggesting that by taking this away from local officials and putting more power in the hands of the legislature, that it's going to be some sort of a violation of civil rights. So I'm interested to see where that goes and whether or not that stops any of these other states in their tracks. Because if the Congress isn't going to do something, I guarantee you that the Justice Department was looking at that and saying, well, Congress can act, and if they don't, we're going to. But I like the fact that the Justice Department is getting involved and looking at this from a civil rights perspective, because this is really what it's about. And the intent of these bills is not to give us any more confidence in the system. It is to suppress the turnout. That's all there is. That's all they've got. And so, I want to see what Merrick Garland decides to do with this, and I will be watching what he says a little bit later on today to find out what the basis for the suit is. But I applaud it because I think there's a whole bunch of states that are doing copycat stuff to what Georgia did. And if Congress isn't going to act, then justice is going to have to.
Yes.
You know, every time you say Merrick Garland, I go, the guy on the Supreme Court, and I go like, oh yeah, right. No, he's that didn't happen.
That's right.
It's just so amazing when you look at, there was a thing on TV, a TV movie on MLK and stuff. I think it was on Sunday night. They're talking about Lyndon Johnson. He's signing the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and here it is. We're still fighting for voting rights.
When they essentially when the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, John Roberts said it's a different era. We've come a long way, and blah blah blah. And and how long did it take for them to start immediately putting back more restrictions?
Come a long way. It's like a Virginia Slims commercial. Come on now. Hey, we welcome Steve Fishman to the conversation. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to everyone. I'm glad I'm
morning.
Absolutely. Well, we were just talking about the fact that Merrick Garland announced that he is going to be suing the state of Georgia over some of the newly enacted voting laws in that state. And we were discussing as to whether or not that may have a chilling effect on some of the other states that are pursuing similar legislation, including our own state of Michigan. Also talking about why, despite the fact that Michigan Republicans admit there was no fraud and couldn't find any evidence of fraud, they're still pushing these bills anyway. And wondering if you had any thoughts on that, sir.
Well, I listened to basically what you guys are saying. I do believe, and I've always believed, and it's funny when we're talking about the original Voting Rights Act in 1965, if the feds don't do things, going back to Eisenhower sending troops, to get kids into school in Little Rock, if the feds don't do it, it won't get done, because I think the answer to your question, Greg, will it affect these state legislators and these kind of people? Nothing affects them. Nothing affects them at all, other than what they think their crazy people in their base does. They don't care what's right, and they wouldn't care. I mean, when they lose in court, they'll say it's fixed or whatever else they've been saying. But I absolutely believe, I'm glad to see Garland do this, because quite frankly, for the first couple of months, I think there's a lot more they could be doing. And he's been treading very lightly, which, as Greg well knows, that's the Democrats' way, right? We don't want to bulldoze the hell out of the opposition like those guys do.
Yeah.
If they were playing ball, they'd never win a game. They'd never win.
You're right.
10-yard line, and they'd donkey dick around with it for 3 yards, and then you'd take it down the other way with an 80-yard pass, and you'd score. That's the way they look at the world. And I'm glad
I'm going to adopt that figure of speech. They're going to donkey dick around with it.
I've actually never heard that phrase before.
I've never heard it either.
Not in that usage. No.
It's a keeper.
How many times
though.
have I told you guys you should have gone to Mumford in 1960? You'd say 50-11 for an infinite number. You'd have all kinds of things. Nobody talks about it anymore. I won't even get into what we call each other black and white people, but we won't even talk about that. We had phraseology for that too.
We've come a long
the good
way.
old days.
Different world. Don't go there.
All right. Well, if we're going to talk about elections for just a second, and of course, legal stuff, I think it is wise that we talk about the fact that Rudy Giuliani had his law license suspended yesterday by the state of New York. And he could contest it, but if he does, then he's going to potentially lose it for the rest of his life. So he basically can't practice law in his home state right now. And the judge was very, very clear. It's because you lied a whole bunch of times in court about what you were doing. You lied. And normally the stuff, it can go on and take months or years for anybody to really look into this kind of stuff. He acted pretty darn quickly on this. And I thought what was sort of indicative of how bad he got. Remember when he refused to be sworn in, or they refused to swear him into Michigan because they knew he would be telling a bunch of lies and could have been liable for some sort of, perjury charge. But is anybody surprised?
I am completely surprised. It has restored my faith in the bar. It really has.
Well, I think it's important for you guys to make the distinction. When people are talking about referring some of these lawyers to the attorney general or to whatever because they're lying in court, et cetera, and so forth, that's a little bit different. The bar associations of every state has every right to bring any of us, any lawyers, in front of them for conduct that's unbecoming or conduct whatever way they want to define it in their particular state. And it's funny that you mentioned Giuliani. He was going to be my schmuck of the week, but not just for the fact that his license was suspended. Think about how far someone has fallen. This is a man who was the United States Attorney in the Southern District, I think, of New York. This is a man who was the mayor of the biggest city in the country. And look where he is today. And why? As we've said on this program before, because he could not stand aging and drifting into obscurity. He had to come back, and his ego was so big that he had to get involved in stuff like this. And now look at him. That to me,
well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that is the most prestigious U.S. Attorney's office in the country, and he ran it. And he was Mr. Crime Fighter, and he was the man who cleaned up Times Square, and he was all this other thing. And now he's a clown with goo dripping down the side of his face, holding press conferences in landscaping businesses. I mean, it's like, it's. I mean, isn't there a book that one of those Lincoln Project people put out, and anything Trump touches dies?
Yeah.
I've heard that.
Or something like that. And I mean, he's the patient zero of that.
Well, and it has been such a tragic fall. And don't forget, he's got his hands in his pants in a Borat movie.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
So,
right. Yeah.
I mean, but
he was looking for change.
He was tucking in his shirt.
Tucking in his shirt. That's exactly right. But I mean, you look at the people that have attached themselves to this whole grift, as we called it at the beginning of the show, which it is, and there are people that are still fundraising off of the big lie and everything else. But this sends a pretty big warning to the people who are involved to knock this stuff off. And I mean, Lynn Wood, for instance, some of the other attorneys that are involved in this better be watching out, because they've been even worse with some of the things they've done. They just haven't done it in front of a court in many instances. Giuliani was stupid enough to go to court and say it in front of a judge.
I told you I dealt with Lynn Wood. He was a lawyer for Gary Condit in the whole Chandra Levy thing, and he was a very reputable attorney. I mean, he was down in Atlanta, Gary Condit, and I wrote him one night when he was pushing for that whole fraud down in Georgia, and I said, I remember you being a gentleman and a smart attorney and stuff. I said, what the hell happened? He says, oh, you'll see, and I was just shocked that he was such a dignified guy, and now he's just turned into such a clown.
Well, they all are clowns. I mean, and by the way, I forgot to tell you about this. When we were talking about Michigan and the Republican report, of course, who responds immediately? Donald Trump puts out a message yesterday saying that Mike Shirkey is somebody that needs to be run out of town on a rail. I mean, and so he's demanding like 100% loyalty. And if you could find somebody that has done their best to bend over backwards for Donald Trump more than Mike Shirkey, I'd like to see who it is.
Michael Cohen.
No, Cohen ratted on him. Come on.
Eventually, but I mean, it took a long time.
Mike Shirkey was going to those meetings, and he was listening to the lip service of these people in Hillsdale County who are espousing all these conspiracy theories, and he's rattling it off, saying, "I'm on your side. I agree with you. We're going to do this, and we're going to look into it." I mean, Mike Shirkey. The one thing that he did do was tell the truth when the report came out. We just couldn't find anything. And that for him is not 100% loyalty, which means he is now persona non grata with the Trumpers. Again, there should be a lesson in here for anybody that is still on the Trump train. Jump off before it crashes. Seriously.
It's already crashed.
Well, no, but he's still out there. He's holding a rally in Ohio today, I think.
I love to read the know-nothings on various social media, the Michigan know-nothings, who say stuff like, all right, Mike Shirkey, he's gone. He's going to be gone. It's like, well, yeah, he's term limited. Remember that? It's like, he's gone. That may be one reason why he's, dared to dance around the truth a little bit. Yeah. So,
well, it's one of those things. I still need to push him. Okay, no fraud. Yeah. Michigan did its great job with its election. Let it go. And again, you talk about the comment section, Nancy. I keep reading the comment section. Charlie LaDuff of Deadline Detroit posted something about this the other day, saying, "I was an election worker. I told you months ago there was no fraud." And this lady comes on the comment section and says, "Well, I want to see a forensic audit." And I brought this up again, and I just asked her a simple question: define forensic audit when it comes to ballots. Okay, it's not an accounting procedure here. This is not like looking for criminal activity in Donald Trump's books. That would be a forensic audit. That doesn't exist. Jocelyn Benson said it the other day. She's like, I don't see anything in the law anywhere about there being such a thing as a forensic audit when it comes to ballots. I mean, you can do bamboo shoots. You're looking for bamboo shoots in the paper, I guess. But
that was extremely modest of Charlie to claim that because he worked as a election worker, he alone knows that there was no fraud. I was an election worker too, and I didn't see any.
But I did believe him. I did believe him when he said that. But anyway,
and he got
go ahead, Steve.
He got a lot of pushback. He got a lot of grief.
Of course he did.
All along the way. Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Steve.
Greg, what you should have told the lady that wants the forensic audit. Lengel will remember this because he used to cover the court. What she really needs is a trip to the forensic center, which is where we would send criminal defendants to see if they were competent to stand trial. She needs an examination. She doesn't need any audit. They need a forensic exam and let her spout all that nonsense. And one of the shrinks from over at the forensic center would have been testifying in court that she's incompetent to stand trial. That's what she needs.
I mean, Steve is cracking a joke, but there is something to what you're saying. I think we've become far too lenient in accepting what is clearly craziness from people. Folks who are telling us that the sky is red instead of blue, or the sky is purple instead of blue, and they expect for us to believe this kind of stuff. At some point, there has to be a community standard for sanity, for facts, for truth. And we just can't keep paying attention to people that are clearly kind of nuts.
Well, here's the thing, though. There's an entire network devoted to them. There's a guy on OAN who came out the other day and is still espousing the big lie, still saying that there are hundreds of thousands of people that somehow participated in this giant scheme. Nobody's talking. I'm not sure how you keep that many people quiet about anything. But, here's the thing. He's saying we used to have a way to deal with traitors like this, execution. And then comes on TV yesterday and says, I wasn't saying execute the people. I'm like,
I was just talking about the current statute.
But there's video. There's video of you saying, we used to deal with people in my day back then, execution. Like, sounds like you're for executing people that don't agree with you politically.
And what day was that?
That was Wednesday. The video came out Wednesday, and the apology and well, not an apology. The argument that it was misconstrued came out today. So yes, a 24-hour period.
That was an extremely creepy piece of
OAN is a very creepy network. Mm-hmm. Have you ever watched that channel for more than 5 minutes?
I don't have cable, so I can all I see are the clips that go bounce around social media. It is frightening. Like and the OAN is like, all right, if Fox is now pushed into CNN country, OAN is the Fox of the far fringe right. Then you get into some of the even crazier networks like Newsmax. Well,
Newsmax is not as bad as OAN.
It isn't?
I would suggest that Newsmax actually has some journalistic integrity, whereas OAN has absolutely none.
There's one called Right Side Broadcast Network.
Oh, that one's pretty bad too. Yes.
Yeah, and there's I've seen some. They're amazing, and this is going to come up with my schmuck, but it's kind of like Lengel and I were talking about this yesterday. Watching these, it's kind of like watching TV news in Traverse City, where the mics go out and somebody's got a giant zit on their head and can't afford enough makeup to cover it up, that sort of thing. It's just like, it's got that small market charm to it. So,
well, since you mentioned TV news, let's pivot to this story. Channel 62 has a weekend meteorologist named April Moss who decided to go the Project Veritas route to expose discrimination in the workplace, COVID vaccination discrimination in the workplace, as she said. And she's like, I'm going to go to Project Veritas and do this. While she was doing a live weather report, by the way, mirroring something that was done at another station a week earlier, April Moss has since been fired. She was arguing that she was being discriminated against by CBS because they had vaccination rules. You had to be vaccinated. They wanted everybody to get vaccinated. And if you didn't, you had to wear a mask.
I don't think they had rules that you had to be vaccinated.
Well, you had to be masked if you weren't vaccinated.
You had to be masked, exactly. And they insisted on testing. And it was testing and masking that she flushed her career way over.
Well, and she said that, she didn't get an opportunity to talk about these things on the air and that they were stifling her stories about what was going on with the vaccine.
You're the weather lady.
Okay. Well, a weekend weather lady And I've got a theory behind this, and hear me out for just a second, because you get to a certain point in your broadcast career, especially in television, where if you have not progressed beyond the weekend weather person at Channel 62, which of course is the smallest news operation in Metro Detroit for a television news, you still haven't moved beyond that. And you get to a certain age, after 6 years that she's been doing this, you're not going any further in this market. You're probably not jumping to a bigger market, and it's time to reassess your career and where it's going. And that's no knock. It's happened to everybody that's in broadcast. You have to make a decision as to whether or not you keep doing it, or if you basically hit a wall.
Well, and as a PR guy, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So think about all the publicity she's gotten now that she would have never gotten talking about, the weekend weather.
But that's my whole point. There were not options like OAN and Newsmax and places like this before. They didn't exist. They've come into being in the last few years. And now, all of a sudden, if I got on the right side of James O'Keefe and Project Veritas, maybe I can get one of those gigs at a place like OAN and sell my soul to the fucking devil, excuse my language, and make some coin, which I'm clearly not making at Channel 62 as a weekend weathercaster. And by the way, you don't have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday either.
We call it wingnut welfare.
Well, that's pretty much what it is. That's my theory. But what do you guys think?
She's at over $102,000 now in her Christian fundraising page, which, as you say, I mean, she maybe made 25,000 grand for the year, and now she's got about 4 years of salary right there.
Well,
right. And stop mentioning that guy's name, man, because next thing you know, he's going to put Deadline Detroit in his little weirdo network, and they're going to be talking about us. And
O'Keefe?
Yeah. Now you said it 3 times. It's like you say it 3 times, and the devil shows up.
He doesn't need to have
transparent.
He doesn't need to have a hidden camera to find out where I'm coming from, Greg.
Right.
I put it out there every single week.
You guys are biased here.
We are not biased. We are shamefully.
Well, no, we are objectively looking at facts and discerning whether or not those facts are accurate, and whether or not the people who are spouting the non-facts are indeed batshit crazy. So we do spend a lot of time talking about that, but so what are you going to do? I see this trend happening though. Project Veritas is trying to do this in a number of places. But for me, okay, she didn't get vaccinated. She didn't want to wear the mask. She said she's being discriminated against. A bunch of employment attorneys said, no, there's no case here. She doesn't have a case. This is not discrimination. Private companies have the right to make policies like this. Steve, I see you nodding your head.
That's exactly right. We talked about it, I think, the last time. There's certain things that you can sue about. And I don't do this kind of stuff for a living, but I have friends who do. If it's on the basis of gender, if it's on the basis of race, on the basis of religion, there's certain recognized things. But what you just said, as far as all the lawyers that I've ever talked to, a private company can say, look, if you don't want to wear a mask, that's fine. Just don't come to see us. That's all.
Well, didn't a bunch of nurses from a hospital around here sue about that?
That was down in Texas. Okay. And they all got fired. So,
right.
And the judge upheld the firing. The federal judge said, that's legitimate firing. But the interesting thing about this was, if you go to deadlinedetroit.com, we have a story about April's situation. And there's some audio that we have on there with her talking to her chief engineer. And he just basically called her selfish, said she was really stupid for doing what she did. And she said, well, I wanted to see some change. And he said, the only change you're going to see is on the weekend weather desk. Which is harsh.
I feel in some ways, I feel for her, because lots of times when these kinds of, public situations arise, there's usually something else kind of going on too. You know what I mean? We all have been stressed by the pandemic and this, that, and the other. Now, it's either just a shameful ploy to raise her visibility. She can make the jump you were just talking about, or there's something else going on there.
Yeah. Well, I hate to see it happen this way, but somebody else did it, which tells me that there's more to it than just the two of them. James O'Keefe is up to something. It'll be interesting to see what it is.
Well, and did you ever find out what the other case was in Houston, where the woman was doing a live shot and she's like, I'm going to be talking to Project Veritas.
It's the exact same thing. Same thing.
No, it wasn't about masks though. It turned out this was her bombshell. She wanted the station to do more stories about Bitcoin.
Oh, that's right.
And her news director essentially said, we're going to make a judgment call. There's not much interest in our readership. Essentially, it was like, it wasn't a case of suppression or they're making me wear a mask or they're making me get a shot or anything like that. It was, they won't cover a story that I think they should cover. And, which is the way every news organization works. There's a chain of command. You can come to any editor and say, I want to do a story about X. And if they say, I don't think so, well, you just got to swallow it. That's the way things work.
And the rationale for blowing off that story was a pretty solid one. The guy in Houston's like, look, the 5 o'clock audience, he's like, it is, the poorest audience we have. And he goes, so do we really want to put a bunch of stories about Bitcoin, which is something that only a few wealthy people are messing around with on the air? Most of the people are going to shake their heads and go, I don't give a damn about this. Yeah, he's like, and that was his rationale for not running it, which makes a lot of sense. Know your audience, cater to that audience.
Yes.
Exactly. It's kind of like a sci-fi movie where they're like going, well, we're going to have a high pressure system there. And like they get zapped and they go, and I'll be talking to Project Veritas about discrimination. And she'll be like, what? How did that come out of my mouth? What was going on? It's like...
Well, all right. So, okay, we've got some other stuff to get to. So let's move on, shall we? I wanted to get into this last week a little bit because it's something that's been bothering me quite a bit. But in the last couple of days, it's been elevated to a new level because of Matt Gaetz and, of course, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff talking about critical race theory. And, Matt Gaetz put out a tweet the other day saying, no wonder we've lost so many wars with generals like this guy, because all he said when he was asked about this, and he sort of went off a little bit, and he was right to. He just said, look, I want to understand the roots of white rage in this country. I want to understand what happened. He's like, I read Chairman Mao. I read, Lenin. I read Trotsky. That doesn't make me a communist, but I'm trying to learn more about what motivates the people that I'm dealing with here.
What a concept.
Like, what is wrong with us learning a little bit more about the things that shaped our history? And I mean, the Republicans are going absolutely bananas over whether or not we should actually tell the truth about what happened in our country and how our economy was formed and basically how our government grew and how decisions were made based on a whole lot on racial issues in this country. Now you've got people showing up at school board meetings saying, how dare they teach CRT to our kindergartners? I'm like, nobody is doing that. No. Nobody is doing that. I mean, and it's just, so this has become the new culture war hotspot. Boogeyman is critical race theory and whether or not your kids are being indoctrinated here. And I'll tell you what, we take the bait every damn time. We're talking about it, obviously. But I mean, Fox News, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, has mentioned critical race theory over 2,000 times this year alone.
There was a story in Politico that this is the strategy for the midterms.
What, scare the hell out of white people?
They're going to run on critical race theory, which is not happening anywhere outside of a few, graduate departments at the university level. They're going to claim that it divides us, that it teaches white children to hate themselves, and
it teaches white children they're oppressors,
that they're oppressors, right.
But I mean, one of my schmuck nominees was going to be, let's see, where is it? I've got to pull it up here. It was going to be Dick Morris, but I needed to include him in this segment.
The toe sucker.
Dick Morris. Remember Dick Morris, everybody?
Yeah.
So Dick Morris goes on Newsmax, on Newsmax, and was talking about General Milley's remarks to the committee the other day. And he went off on this rant that was really bizarre about critical race theory and what it teaches. And he says, and what happens if you have a black mom and a white dad and a kid who is born? He's going to learn that his dad oppressed his mom. So that's going to reinforce the Oedipal notion that all kids have of wanting to kill their father and marry their mother.
Wait a minute. Time out. So are you saying I got to avoid my son now? Because
apparently he wants to kill you. And yes.
I didn't know I was in such peril. I really thought everything was pretty fine in our family.
Well, and the great part was that Dick Morris said the Oedipal notion that every kid has. I'm like, no, don't recall that one. So. I really liked my dad. He was a great dude. And
see, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. This craziness. Some people are just fucking insane, and we should recognize it for what it is. The irony is that white people came up with critical race theory.
That's
you know,
true.
they invented it.
Harvard Law School, wasn't it? Wasn't it Harvard?
Right. You know, it's like, hey, you know, now the other white people are saying that this is a, you know, boogeyman. This is the Willie Horton moment without an election.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's
really
the fact that even around here in Michigan, people are talking about it here in the points. These folks are running around at the school board meeting talking about critical race theory. They don't even know what it is.
Precisely. When you asked Ted Cruz, a guy with a Harvard degree, what's critical race theory? He started talking. It sounded like he was talking in Swahili. He couldn't even make a sentence.
Why it got to be Swahili, man? Why got to be Swahili?
Okay,
How about Urdu?
You know, why can't it be like, you know, they're speaking Russian? You know, why it's going to be Swahili?
I mean, you know, I'm still trying to figure this out. I don't understand what the fear is about this. I mean, and why? I mean, because look, I understand if some guy that's like a tour manager at a plantation down in, you know, Louisiana might sort of whitewash the story of what actually went down at that plantation. We've seen stuff like that where they're like, you know, we were talking about this just a couple of weeks ago on the show where they're like, you know, hey, see the master, you know, and hiding from the rogue slaves, you know. I don't know if you remember that, but, you know, we are allowed to tell our kids about what's going on when it comes to Black Lives Matter. We are allowed to tell them what went on when it comes to the Civil War and the actual reasons for fighting the Civil War, which, by the way, we're not states' rights. Don't
tell them these things. We are failing them. I mean, we are raising ignorant children. And maybe that's the problem that we're going through now is all these idiots, like apparently we're taking smoke breaks throughout civics class. I took civics in junior high school, but never mind.
You know, look, in Germany, they teach about, you know, the Nazi era,
the Holocaust.
they're very open about it. But I remember in you know, in the 1960s in school learning about separate drinking fountains down in you know, blacks being barred from restaurants down south, and I was just baffled. I was like, what country is that?
Well, I never got the narrative up here, though. I never got the narrative that this was some sort of benevolent system and that, you know, people were better off under the old system in this country, because that's what they're taught down south.
That's what I got from reading.
We have a history. This country has a history, and it is a shameful one in terms of, you know, some of the things involving blacks. I mean, we're talking about slavery. We're talking about whatever, the Green Book, where blacks couldn't stay in certain hotels down south, and some Jews, frankly, in Florida. We have a history of bigotry, and we've had a resurgence under Donald Trump where it's okay to be a bigot.
It's not that it's just bigot; it's a whole system of oppression.
Right.
I mean, you know, bigotry is an attitude. I mean, oppression is a real thing. And the excuse me. Go ahead, Lengel.
No. But I'm just saying that there's such a history. Then, you know, the thing that drives me crazy is that I'm not asking for statues to be removed. Look, Henry Ford was the biggest anti-Semite, but he did a lot of great stuff. So as long as people know that, I don't know that we have to like remove his name from everything. I'm okay with that. But we have people who are saying, and I've heard this even, you know, more recently sometimes, where people say, well, you know, slavery back in the 1700s, that was a different time. And it's like, when was it ever? The Jews were slaves in Egypt thousands of years ago, and
God smoked them.
And and they got out of slavery, and nobody said, you know, we could try that slavery thing again with some different people. It was never okay to treat people like shit.
No,
it was never okay to chain people up. It was never okay to beat people. Yeah.
You're forgetting
if you haven't had the opportunity, I would recommend everybody take a moment and look at HBOs Eliminate All the Beasts. That is an unbelievable 4-part documentary about what we're talking about on a broader scale. It's amazing. And I think part of what we're seeing here is, aside from the whip them into a frenzy so we can have something to run on kind of issue, is also about supporting the hierarchy of race as it existed, and the idea that, you know, that there are people that are better than others. You know, fear is at the core of, you know, what's going on. And in some kind of way, we need to be able to address this fear.
But it's, go ahead, Nancy.
I was just going to say, the other thing that you need to add about the Ford, Henry Ford and his anti-Semitism is the Ford Motor Company has gone a long way to try to rectify that situation. They have dealt with it. They have acknowledged it. They have paid, reparations of a sort. I mean, they are trying to make that better. And, what critical race theory is still stuck at is just acknowledging that it happened and that this is the system we have now is a direct, it was the fruit of that particular rotten tree.
Well, but the thing is, what I see right now that's scaring me a little bit about this is one, the level of hysteria that is being generated over this. The outrage factory, perpetual outrage factory is definitely going into hyperdrive, but it's extending into other things. I don't know if you saw the bill that Ron DeSantis in Florida just signed the other day, requiring all college professors and students to fill out a survey about their political beliefs and where they come down on politics so they can determine whether or not there is a good, quote, intellectual mix at state universities amongst the student body and the instructional body. There are no guarantees that you won't lose your job. Yeah. And if they find it's too out of whack one way or the other, and I guarantee it's going to be one way that they're worried about, they're potentially losing state funding over this. And I'm sorry, last I checked, nobody had to sit there and talk about their political beliefs as a way of, it's against the law, I thought, to require somebody to talk about these things.
The University of Florida and
I could be wrong.
Florida State too are generally considered to be pretty good schools, and this will take care of that pretty fast. So,
well, I mean, I'm sorry.
This is why they try this crap in Michigan from time to time. Some ignoramus who's just been elected, wants to. Oh, I'm going to introduce a bill to require all LGBT reading material at the University of Michigan. It has to run through my committee first. And the fact is that the University of Michigan and Michigan State and Wayne State have constitutional autonomy. Yeah. The other schools don't, but the big three do. And they don't have to. I mean, and that's what, this was, of course, a New Frontier Constitution. It was instituted in the early 60s in Michigan, but it was an attempt to essentially codify at the constitutional level what we have always believed about academia, which is they have to be free to think and teach what they want.
Well, and here's the thing, though. I mean, this is very McCarthy-esque. Because if you start sitting there and trying to gather information, I mean, what's next? Are you going to have blacklists pretty soon? Well, this guy, he's a liberal. He can't teach anywhere. He gets blacklisted from all these different universities and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
that's happening.
It's paranoid, and it's very, very much. And somebody said the other day to me, they're like, well, if you want to go full blown communist and socialist, and I just said, easy, McCarthy. That's the only thing I said. I'm just like, enough of this. I mean, yeah, I'm a commie. That's right. Yeah. Anyway, and when states like Florida start trying to put that kind of pressure on the intellectual, status of their professors because they fear, quote unquote, liberal indoctrination. Well, no, nobody's going to indoctrinate our kids but me. I mean, come on now. That's just like, no, you can believe what I think, but if you don't, then you're being indoctrinated into some bad thing. It's
my daughter went to the University of Michigan, and all I got was a new vegetarian in the family. So there you go.
That's exactly right. The meat industry is going to try to get rid of those professors at the University of Michigan. But anyway, so I wanted to not forget that that actually happened this week, that Ron DeSantis did this as he, of course, tries to take the torch and mantle from Donald Trump, as Trump is looking more and more pathetic by the day as 2024 approaches. What else do we want to talk about? Oh, how about this? Nancy Pelosi deciding to go ahead on her own with a January 6th commission, a select committee on this. We'll see if it's bipartisan or not. I have a feeling she will probably appoint a couple of Republicans like Adam Kinzinger, who actually does want to find out what happened. I wouldn't be surprised if there were a couple of Republicans on there just as a show that it is not just Democrats that want to learn the truth. There are a few Republicans out there.
Peter Meyer. Let's go for Peter Meyer.
He may do it too. And it's a good way for him to raise his status as a young congressperson.
The hot ginger.
I'm not sure if the select committee is going to be able to get as much done, but it's still worth doing, I think. Does anybody disagree?
I think it's something we should. I think the biggest question mark is what did some of the congressional, GOP members have to do with the whole event? I think that's important. I think we know we've gotten a good idea. I mean, the FBI is done a pretty good job of unearthing, the Oath Keepers or whatever, that there were some plans that were going on. There's enough evidence there. I think the question really is about, to me at least, what role did Congress play in helping perpetuate this? And also what was going on at the White House as Donald Trump was watching. I'd like to hear of people who were sitting with him and what he was thinking and what he didn't do and allowed it to continue.
I think though that I don't know if you guys read the Bulwark. The Bulwark are these ex-conservatives. Yeah. There was an excellent article in there this week. I can't remember who did it, but someone who conducts focus groups. And the particular focus group was a focus group of pretty much independents, some Democrats, some Republicans, but people who dumped Trump and voted for Biden. And while I agree with Craig, I think it's important to make sure that this stuff is examined. It was incredible in this focus group that all of them said they want the Democrats to stand for something. They're already dealing with the Republicans who stand for nothing. They stand against things. And they don't want the Democrats to spend all their time investigating and relitigating the things that happened in January, blah, 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 blah. It was just very interesting to listen to, because those are the people that we certainly don't want to lose in the 2022 election, right? So I like the idea of doing it, but I don't want us to make that, well, this is what Democrats stand for. We're going to investigate what happened back in January, rather than,
Here's something you're going to notice, though, about Nancy Pelosi. She can walk and chew gum at the same time. She's going to have these bills going through that she needs to put forward to get over to the Senate, and at the same time that she's doing this. Unlike the Senate, which basically, it's tough for them just to get out of bed in the morning.
It's going to be interesting. She's doing this, and we may see this sort of coincide with the actual prosecutions of the 500 or so people who have so far been arrested, indicted, and charged with, breaching the Capitol and trying to stop the proceedings. We have not, as a country, had an opportunity to see the justice system, see a trial play out, and we've got TV stations that are completely dedicated to covering trials, and 500 people, I guess, it could get old after a while, but to see people, the evidence that the government brings, to hear people testify, to hear people, who are accused, take the stand and testify themselves if they choose to do so. I mean, I think that kind of stuff is going to be riveting, and even put what they did in a sharper focus, where folks won't be able to say, well, they were just, it was like, they were just doing a tour.
They're on a picnic. It was a picnic. That's
right. I think that's going to be fascinating to look. Hopefully,
the grandma was sentenced to probation yesterday. She wasn't doing anything. She wasn't doing any vandalism, but she was walking around getting selfies taken inside the Capitol, where she clearly wasn't supposed to be. And she got several months, 8 months probation, I think. And again, so I think it's likely going to be. Go ahead, Steve.
There's one thing, though. What Greg says is true. It'd be great if you have these things on live TV. And you're right. There are plenty of TV stations that like to cover that. So the problem is federal court, no cameras in the courtroom. And I can see most of these crimes are charged federally. So the best you're going to get is the breathless stuff from outside, or somebody recounting what someone said. It'd be
even with Zoom, the feds aren't letting cameras in.
Cameras have never been allowed in the federal building.
No.
As long as I've been a lawyer. Zoom is different. Zoom, you can for a hearing. Well, that'd be interesting. No, but these will be live. They'll be live, so there won't be Zoom. Like
it's known as the Courtroom Sketch Artist Full Employment Act.
Well, that's what Cheryl. Yeah, Cheryl. That's what she used to always say. But the truth of the matter is, I can tell you guys from my experience as a lawyer, the presence of cameras, particularly the way it is now, where you've got all these breathless people going crazy. The last case that I tried in state court, where there was more attention to it, it really affects the entirety of the proceeding. It's just like I always say, if there's a camera watching you eat breakfast, you're going to eat breakfast different than you do when you're just sitting in your house reading a newspaper. You just do things different.
I'm going to eat less.
I hate to say that because I'm one of those people who, as a journalist, we always advocate for more openness, not less. But you're absolutely right. I mean, look at C-SPAN. It's in the famous speech to the empty chamber.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, but there's some real great bombs though that are dropped in those speeches every once in a while. That's like where Louis Gohmert spends his time. So I mean, where do you think I get this material? All right. Well,
I want to say real quickly. It's interesting with the cameras. With the Zoom, they're so strict in the federal court that if you take a screenshot, you will be suspended from.
Oh, right.
From
really?
Yeah. And you would think, okay, I'm watching this on Zoom. Why can't I take a screenshot? But they won't.
They don't like that.
Crazy.
All right. We're running out of time, everybody, which means one thing. And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week. Schmuck of the Week time, and I'm giving this one to Nancy Derringer first.
Okay, but we already kind of plowed this ground earlier in the show. Mine is April Moss, the aging, desperate for attention TV weekend weather lady on Channel 62.
Yeah.
I was talking to Lengel about this a little while ago, and it's like, I have never seen this newscast. Is there a newscast on Channel 62? But apparently there is. She has her Christian GoFundMe site, it's actually called Give, Send, Go, is over $100,000 now, which I'm absolutely certain is more money than she probably makes in how many years, Lengel?
Probably
2?
4 years.
Oh, I don't think she's that. Do you think she's that badly paid?
I think it's a pretty
Yeah. Okay. She's got a little nest egg going and everything else, but it's this hysteria. It's the look at me. It's the making too much about or something out of nothing. And, maybe she'll use that money to, get a little work done and kind of reemerge on the Newsmax stage.
If she were working at Traverse City, like station 9 and 10, full time up there, she'd probably be making about $25,000. So she'd probably make.
You'd never displace the weather guy who's on up there. He's been there for a long time and he's not going anywhere. Oh yeah,
he ain't going nowhere.
All right, Steve Fishman, who do you got?
Well, as I said before, I had Giuliani, and I still have Giuliani for the basic reasons that I said. Just the precipitous fall from where he started into where he is today. I can tell you this: anybody, any lawyer, any of us, a suspension, is one thing, but this is really a suspension preceding a disbarment, is what it looks like to me.
Yeah,
and that's different. When people get disbarred, at least in this state, at least with the people that I knew, that's a big damn deal. It really, it's a huge fall from grace. And for this guy to go from where he went to where he is today, he's my schmuck of the week.
See, I thought you might make it the NCAA for losing 9-0 in the Supreme Court.
Well, but we were going to talk about that, but we don't have time, I guess. That's not as solid a case as it should have been. That decision wasn't what I would have liked. They didn't go as far as they should have, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
But, the headlines made it sound like they just threw everything that the NCAA was doing out, but they didn't really do that. So anyway.
But I think they opened the door for it, though. I mean, the monopoly that they have on the college athlete is over.
They're letting them know that, what did the Chambers brothers sing in that song? Now the time has come.
Time has come today.
That's today. Yes.
That's it.
All right, Greg Bowens, who's your schmuck?
Mine is Matt. I can't believe he's not locked up already. Gaetz.
Matt Gaetz, absolutely.
Matt Gaetz, yeah.
Because he asked that asinine question, to the Joint Chiefs and the general when they were sitting there about, well, I've heard from officers that because we're making them discuss racial issues, that's making things divisive.
Well,
and I'm like,
and a woke army is a weak army.
Right. Yeah. I'm like, I used to be in the military a long time ago, and the Navy was not always known for its, inclusiveness, and the Marine Corps even worse. But I'm saying we've come a long way, since then. Like we've come a long way since, the Tuskegee Airmen. And I felt like that the general who says, look, I'm a white guy, I need to understand was an awesome quote and a great way to put things in perspective for everybody, white, black, Asian, whatever. And but Matt Gaetz, in trying to press and prosecute that issue, is just the latest, iteration of CRT in a place where it doesn't need to be.
Well, and then when he got his ass handed to him by the general in that statement, where he basically just said, "You're an idiot." That's pretty much what he did. Then Matt Gaetz came out with a tweet the other day that just said, "Well, this is why we haven't won more wars, because we got generals like this." I'm like, really? What service have you provided, Matt Gaetz?
Yeah.
And people
What have you
think
done for your country?
that white fragility does not exist.
Oh my God! Well, yeah, white fragility. Thy name is Matt Gaetz.
Absolutely.
All right, Allan Lengel, who you got?
I have Senator Ted Cruz, who they voted in committee 10-10. He voted against approving the nominee for ATF Director David Chipman, who's actually from this area. And the point is, he's perpetuating this decades-long fraud in Washington by trying to pretend that the ATF director, I mean, David Chipman is been involved with a gun control organization, but he doesn't the head of the ATF does not make gun laws. They enforce the gun laws. And basically, people like Ted Cruz, their constituents don't want gun laws enforced, even though we have mass shootings on, twice weekly. And so it's just a continued fraud. Because the vote was 10-10, it does go to the full Senate for confirmation. And the question is, can they get 51 votes? It's, with Joe Manchin, you just never know where he's going to go. I mean, West Virginia's got to be a raving, gun state. So we'll see what happens there. But, the bottom line is that ATF directors enforce our current gun laws. They don't make the gun laws, and they don't make up things and say, I don't want to see AK-47s anymore. Go in and, snatch everyone you can. It's just, it's just a fraudulent, it's a hoax.
I wouldn't disagree. All right. Well, I've got one. And it would be the Missouri Republican legislature, the Republican-controlled legislature in the state of Missouri. They are in the midst of negotiating a bill package that would basically re-up their Medicaid expansion as part of the Affordable Care Act. Now, what the Republicans are trying to do in this thing is actually make it so that they cannot cover things like Plan B or even IUDs for women who are on Medicaid. So they want to expand Medicaid or renew the expansion, get the federal dollars, but block paying for birth control for these things, because there are some people that are under the impression that an IUD actually causes abortions, when all it does is really prevent conception in the first place. So it's leading to obvious questions as to whether or not they're trying to outlaw all types of birth control. And the funny thing is, one state over, or two states over in Colorado, where they basically have mandated that all these things are covered, they have reduced teen pregnancy by like 60%.
It's amazing.
Because they cover these things and they actually do this. So they basically want to make it so that somebody getting Medicaid doesn't get an IUD, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I just don't understand the logic behind it. It's very stupid.
Set it and forget it. Birth control has really come into its own in the last 10 years. And if you can get a teenage girl to come in and get her shot, her Depo-Provera shot, or whatever else they're using, it works wonders. 65%, not surprising.
I'm just amazed at the level of interest that some of these politicians and state legislatures have in women's bodies.
Well, I understand why Matt Gaetz is interested.
Yeah, but they got to be 12 for him.
Oh, that was cold.
All right.
By the way, before we sign off, I'd like to remind everybody about Danny Fenster, the journalist from Metro Detroit, who's still in a Myanmar prison. It's been over 30 days now, and if you can continue to bug your Congress members to put pressure on the State Department to continue working. The State Department is working on it, but a little pressure doesn't hurt.
Well, we did get some decent news. I don't want to say it's good news, because it's not going to be good news till he's out. But at the same time, they know that he's alive and he seems to be in pretty good health.
Right.
So the State Department was able to at least convey that to the family, which is great. Knowing that family, it's I can't imagine what they're going through every single day. And again, to everybody down in Miami Beach and what's going on there, just horrible stuff. We'll continue to keep an eye on that. And hopefully that death toll doesn't get as high as they think. But now they're saying 159 people unaccounted for at this point in time. So time's getting short there. But
lax building codes.
There's so much that goes on to buildings down there. And I mean, they were doing an inspection for whether or not they needed to do the concrete work, it appears. And so, 30 years or so, salt air does not treat buildings well.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being a combination of wear and tear plus crappy initial construction plus, and who knows, maybe it'll even have something to do with rising sea levels undermining the
Did they defer maintenance? I mean, there's going to be there's already been a lawsuit filed on this by one of the families, and there's going to be a whole lot more. And this is even before we even know really what happened. It's going to take them several days to really even start getting concrete samples that they can look at. But
DeSantis will blame it on the teaching of CRT.
It's entirely possible.
There were reports that there was some sinking, that the building's been sinking since the 90s.
Yeah, and they, like I said, it looks like they had started the process of trying to figure out what they needed to do because they had inspectors up on the building the day before. So who knows? I mean, and I'll tell you what, if I own buildings in Florida, I've got people out there inspecting every single one of them today. Yeah. And, this company that owns this building, I hope they have good crisis communications because they have not said a word yet. They need to get somebody out there to talk about it as soon as possible. So, all right, well, we got to end with that. I hope everybody has a good weekend, although it certainly looks as if the weather is going to put a bit of a hamper on some of our plans. But that just means there's more time for you to go to deadlinedetroit.com and read up on all the stuff happening in your community. Become a member at Deadline Detroit, deadlinedetroit.com/membership. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks to Lynette's Shrimp House for sponsoring this show. I appreciate them. And also, thanks to Michael Lucido, who isn't here today, but normally would be engineering this broadcast. I still appreciate him anyway. He's out doing a new Detroit Digest, so there'll be more restaurant and foodie content for you on Deadline Detroit very soon.
He's lying. I bet he went to Jobby Nooner.
Today?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's a horrible day out there on that water.
Rainy. That's okay, just
but
means
thanks to my guest, Greg Bowens. I always appreciate you being here, so thank you very much.
I wore a tie for you.
All right, Steve Fishman, we appreciate you being here. By the way, you got a pick for the Pistons at number 1. That was a big deal. Who should they pick?
It's a very simple pick as far as I'm concerned. I know what Weaver's talking about, but if they don't pick Cade Cunningham, I'll be shocked.
Yeah, that kid from Oklahoma State.
I watched a lot of highlights. That kid's way older than his stated age. I can tell you that.
Well, it's first time they've had the first pick since they picked Bob Lanier back in 1970. So
it was amazing. I thought I'd be the first pick. We graduated that year too. They did pick Rudy second. Tomjanovich was the second pick in that draft.
Wow. Steve, you would have been in the B'nai B'rith League.
Yeah.
both of them in the Hall of Fame, by the way. So, it's one of those, you couldn't go wrong with either one of those picks back there. Right. Nancy Derringer and Allan Lengel, I always appreciate the two of you. Thank you very much. And we will do this again next week, everybody. I promise. The week that was on Deadline Detroit. And you can go out and do stuff if you want. But, Allan?
Drive home safely.
The Craig Foley Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House, located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination, serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu, like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north of the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway, noon to 8 Tuesday and Thursday, noon to 10 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and noon to 5 p.m. on Sunday. Call now, get some Lynette's.